"Scrub faster, dishwasher." Her husband laughed as the hostess stood proudly at his side. His mother smirked and told the staff not to help. Grease covered her hands. Then the kitchen doors swung open. A gray-haired man in a tailored suit walked in, and the old head chef quietly stepped aside. The stranger looked straight at her, and the kitchen fell completely silent. Now hold that picture in your mind. A woman at a sink, her hands red from the water, her wedding ring still on her finger, and a room full of people who thought they had already won. Her name was Zuri. And on the night this story begins, she was standing at the dish sink of the finest restaurant in the city, scrubbing plates that had her own recipes still warm on them. Think about that. Her recipes, her sauces. Her hands had built every flavor that left that kitchen for 9 long years. And now those same hands were buried in dirty water while the whole world celebrated without her. The dining room glowed behind the swinging doors. Crystal glasses, soft music, 200 guests in their finest clothes. And at the center of it all, her husband, Joshua, with his arm around another woman. The other woman was named Brielle. She used to seat the guests at the front door, a hostess, a smile in a tight black dress. And tonight she wore a white gown and a ring that Joshua had slid onto her finger that very afternoon. Watch closely now, because the cruelty in this kitchen was not loud. It was quiet. And quiet cruelty is the kind that cuts the deepest. Joshua pushed through the kitchen doors with a glass in his hand. He was tall, handsome, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in that dining room. He looked at his wife at the sink, and he smiled like a man enjoying a private joke. "Scrub faster, dishwasher," he said. "Our guests need clean plates." The staff froze. A few of them looked at the floor. They had cooked beside Zuri for years. They had called her chef. And now they did not know what to call her at all. Joshua's mother, Gloria, stepped in behind him. She was a sharp woman in pearls, a woman who had never once liked the girl her son married. She looked around at the line cooks who had paused to watch. "Don't any of you help her," Gloria said. "She is exactly where she belongs." And Zuri? She said nothing. She did not cry. She did not shout. She picked up the next plate, and she scrubbed. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever watched a person take a blow so cleanly that it scared you more than if they had screamed? That was Zuri that night. Her hands were steady, steadier than the hands of the people laughing at her. The old head chef saw it. His name was Otis, and he had been in kitchens for 40 years. He had hands like leather and eyes that missed nothing. He looked at Zuri's steady hands, and something crossed his face. It was not pity. It looked almost like fear, because Otis knew something, and it was eating him alive. Only 1 week before this night, Joshua had fired her. He had done it in front of the entire kitchen staff, in the middle of the lunch rush, with his voice raised so everyone could hear. "This restaurant needs a name," he had told her, "not a sentiment. People don't come here for a girl who grew up washing pots. They come for an experience. You're done as executive chef." She had stood there in her chef's coat, the one with her name stitched over the heart. She had handed it to him without a word. And the next day, Brielle wore it. You heard me right. The hostess put on the chef's coat. A woman who could not tell a roux from a reduction now wore the title of the woman who had earned it with 9 years of fire and sweat. And the staff? They wanted to say something. You could see it on their faces. A young cook named Davon, A boy Zuri had trained from nothing started to step toward the sink with a clean towel in his hand. He wanted to help her dry the plates. Just that, just a towel. Gloria caught it. "Put that down," she snapped, "or you can wash dishes beside her tomorrow." The boy froze. He looked at Zuri, and Zuri, without lifting her head, said the only words she would say that whole night. "It's all right, Davin," she said softly. "Go on back to your station. Don't lose your place over me." Did you hear that? In the middle of her own humiliation, she was protecting the boy who tried to protect her. That is the kind of heart they were stepping on. That is the kind of soul they thought was weak. A few guests wandered too close to the kitchen doors and peeked in. They saw a woman in a plain dress at a sink, and they saw a bride in a chef's coat laughing in the doorway. And they did not know they were looking at the whole story turned upside down. They went back to their tables. They sipped their wine. They had no idea. So how did a woman go from running the best kitchen in the city to scrubbing its dishes in 7 days? That is the question. And the answer is buried in a truth that not one person in that building knew. Not Joshua. Not Gloria. Not Brielle. Only Otis suspected. And the gray-haired stranger about to walk through those doors, he knew everything. But we are not there yet. For now, just see her. Zuri, at the sink, the steam rising around her tired face. The laughter of the dining room leaking through the doors, her wedding ring catching the light as her hands moved through the dirty water. She lowered her head, and she did not look up. But to understand who just walked through those doors, we have to go back. Back to a small diner, a long time ago, and a man who taught a little girl that the fire never lies. Zuri did not grow up rich. Let me say that plain, so you understand the distance she traveled. She grew up in the back of a tiny corner diner that her father ran with his own 2 hands. His name was Elijah. A big man with a soft voice and forearms scarred from 30 years of hot stoves. The diner had 8 tables and a counter with 6 stools. The booths had tape on the cracks. But the food. Lord, the food. People drove across the whole city for her father's cooking. They lined up in the rain for it, and little Zuri grew up in that warmth. Flour on every surface, steam on the windows, her father humming low while he worked. That was her whole world, and she loved it more than anything. Here is the thing about her father that you need to understand. The very first thing he ever taught her was not how to cook. It was how to wash dishes. She was 6 years old, standing on a milk crate to reach the sink, and her father stood beside her with his big hands over her small ones. "You don't run a kitchen you've never cleaned," he told her. "A real chef knows every station. The pot you scrub today is the pot you'll cook in tomorrow. Never look down on the bottom, baby girl. The bottom is where everything is built." She did not understand it then. She would understand it perfectly. One day, standing at a different sink with grease on her hands. Her father gave her 2 things in this life that mattered more than money. The first was that lesson. The second was a book. It was a worn leather journal stained with flour, held shut by a faded ribbon. Inside were his recipes, written in his own slanted hand. Every sauce, every secret, decades of his life pressed into those pages. And inside the back cover, sealed shut, was a letter. He pressed it into her hands one quiet evening when she was grown, and he held her eyes for a long moment. "Open this only when the kitchen turns against you," he said. She had laughed. "Daddy, what does that even mean?" He did not laugh back. "You'll know," he said. When the people around you forget who you are, when they try to make you small in the very place you belong, that is when you open it, not before. Promise me." She promised. She tucked the journal away, and she did not think about that letter again for years. Why would she? Her father loved her. Her world was warm. The idea that a kitchen could turn against her seemed like a riddle, with no answer. Her father used to say, "The fire never lies." He said it all the time. When a sauce broke, when a young cook tried to cut corners, when a customer complained for no reason, the fire never lies. He meant that cooking shows you the truth of a person. You cannot fake patience over a flame. You cannot fake love in a dish. The fire reveals what is really inside you, and it reveals what is really inside other people, too. She carried that saying in her heart like a small, warm coal. Now let me tell you about her softness, because it matters. When Zuri was a young line cook in her first real job, there was another cook beside her, a boy who had nothing, who came to work with holes in his shoes and a knife so dull it could barely cut an onion. And Zuri, who owned exactly one good knife in the whole world, a knife her father had given her, handed it to that boy without a second thought. "A cook needs a blade he can trust," she told him. "Take mine." That was who she was. She gave. She gave even when she had little. That is the kind of heart that the world loves to take advantage of. Let me tell you one more thing about her father, because it explains everything that comes later. As that little diner grew into something bigger, and bigger still, Elijah did a strange thing. He hid it. He kept his name off the front of the new restaurants. He let other people stand in the photographs. He moved quietly, the way a wise man moves, because he had learned a hard lesson early in life. He had learned that the moment people see how much you have, they stop seeing who you are. "Money brings out the truth in folks," he told Zuri once, late at night, both of them wiping down the last counter. "It doesn't change a person, baby girl. It just removes the mask. So I keep mine small in their eyes. That way, the only people who stay close are the ones who'd have stayed close anyway." She nodded like she understood. She did not yet. But she would. One night, in a kitchen full of betrayers, she would understand every word her father ever said to her, all at once. And there was a reason he made her learn every single station the hard way, with her own 2 hands, never once leaning on his name. There was a reason. She just did not know it yet. Neither did anyone else. Hold on to that question. It matters. And that is how she ended up with Joshua. She met him when she had nothing but a dream and a borrowed apron. He was charming then. He noticed her. He told her she was the most talented person he had ever met. And at the time, when no one else was looking at her, those words were the only fortune she counted. She did not marry a bank account. She married a feeling. She married the way he made her feel seen. What she did not know, what nobody knew, was that her father, the man with the 8-table diner, I had spent the last decades of his life quietly building something the whole world would one day bow to. That little corner diner had grown, and grown, and grown again. By the time the world noticed, it was no longer a diner. It was an empire of restaurants stretched across the country, decorated with the highest honors a kitchen can earn, worth more than most people could imagine in 100 lifetimes of work. But Zuri did not chase that. Her father had kept the size of it quiet, on purpose, the way wise men keep powder dry. He wanted his daughter to be a chef because she loved it. Not because she was rich. He wanted her hands to know the work. So, she cooked, she earned, she climbed, and she never once leaned on her father's name. The same girl who was loved in that warm little diner grew into a woman scrubbing pots alone in a cold, glittering kitchen, while strangers in white gowns wore her title. How does that happen? How does the world take a heart that pure and try to break it? Stay with me. Because she thought the worst was behind her. She was wrong. Joshua had a secret. Let me tell you what it was. Because a villain you understand is a villain who scares you. Joshua was drowning. For all his fine suits and his loud confidence, the man was buried in debt. He had borrowed against things that were not his. He had made promises with money he did not have. He had spent years pretending to be a big man, and pretending is expensive. And underneath the debt was something worse: fear. Joshua was terrified of being a nobody. He had married a brilliant woman, and instead of standing proud beside her, he had spent their whole marriage feeling small in her shadow. Every time a guest praised her cooking, something in him curdled. Every award she earned felt, to him, like a finger pointing at everything he was not. That is the ugly truth of some men. They cannot stand beside greatness. They have to step on it to feel tall. So when Brielle started whispering in his ear, the poison found a man already rotting. Brielle wanted one thing: status. She had spent years standing at the front of fine restaurants, smiling at rich people, watching them live the life she wanted. She did not love Joshua. Let me be honest with you, she barely even liked him. But she saw a man who managed the most famous restaurant in the city, and she decided that man was her ticket through the door she had been holding open for everyone else. "A real man doesn't stay married to a dishwasher," she would murmur to him in the dark. "You're the face of this place. You, not her. Why are you letting a woman who smells like a kitchen hold you back?" And Joshua, weak and frightened and proud, listened. He convinced himself of a plan. He would push Zuri out. He would marry Brielle, the woman who made him feel like a king instead of a shadow. And then, this was the part that mattered to him. He would sell the restaurant. Quietly. Cash out, pay off every debt, and walk away a free man. He believed, you see, that the restaurant was his to sell. He had run it for years. His name was on the management. In his mind, the empire was his crown. He had no idea. No idea at all. So the betrayal deepened day by day. Gloria did her part. The mother forged paperwork to scrub Zuri's name off the staff roster entirely, so that on paper she had never even worked there. "Cleaner that way," Gloria said. "No mess when the time comes." Brielle did her part, too. One afternoon, as Zuri carried a pot across the kitchen, Brielle accidentally tipped a pan of hot oil so it splashed across the floor at Zuri's feet. Zuri jumped back just in time, and Brielle smiled, a small, private smile. The smile of a woman who wanted you to know it was not an accident at all. Through all of it, Zuri stayed quiet. She bent her head. She did the work they gave her, and the staff watched, helpless, as a great chef was turned into a ghost in her own kitchen. But the cruelest thing happened on a Tuesday. Zuri came in early, the way she always did, and she found her father's journal in the trash. Brielle had thrown it out, the leather book, the flower stains, the faded ribbon, her father's whole life in his own hand, tossed in the garbage like a dirty napkin. The ribbon was torn. Grease had soaked one corner. A coffee stain bled across her father's handwriting. And that, not the firing, not the insults, not the hot oil. That was the thing that finally broke Zuri. She picked the book out of the trash with shaking hands. She held it to her chest, and something inside her, something that had stayed strong through every blow, finally went quiet and dark. For days after that, she was hollow. She moved like a woman underwater. She did her work and said nothing and felt nothing. The light in her eyes, the light her father had put there in that little diner, flickered down to almost nothing. She stopped tasting her food. A cook who stops tasting is a cook who has stopped hoping. She went through the motions. She seasoned by memory, not by love. And the worst part was that nobody noticed, because nobody was looking at her anymore. She had become furniture in the kitchen she once ruled. One evening she overheard Joshua on the phone in the hallway, his voice low and urgent, thinking he was alone. "Soon," he was saying. "Just give me a few more weeks. Once the paperwork clears, the whole thing is mine to sell, and you'll get every cent I owe you. Trust me, this place is worth more than you can dream." He laughed, a tight, nervous laugh. "No, she's not a problem anymore. She's washing dishes. She doesn't even fight." Zuri stood around the corner, her back against the cold wall, and she listened to her husband talk about selling her father's life's work as if it were a used car. And still, she did not make a sound. Why didn't she fight? That is what you are asking. I asked it too. But you have to understand, when a person has been hit enough times, fighting starts to feel like one more thing they will take from you. So she held still. She held still and went numb, and the numbness felt almost like peace. Have you ever been there? That place past crying, where you just go numb, where the world keeps hitting you and you stop even flinching, because flinching takes a strength you no longer have. That was Zuri. One night, long after the others had gone home, she sat alone on an overturned crate in the empty kitchen. The big stoves were cold. The only light came from a single bulb over the sink, and in her lap she held the journal, and inside it, the sealed letter. "Open this only when the kitchen turns against you." Her hands trembled on the envelope. The kitchen had turned against her. Hadn't it? Surely this was what her father meant, but she could not open it. Some fear held her back, a fear she could not name. "The kitchen has turned against me, Daddy," she whispered into the dark. "So why am I so afraid of what you left me?" She put the letter back. She retied the torn ribbon as best she could, and she went home to a house where her husband no longer slept beside her. What she did not see was Otis. The old head chef had stayed late, too, watching her from the shadows by the walk-in. His leathery face was wet, and when she finally left, he pulled out his phone with shaking hands and made a call. "Mr. Reed," he said quietly, "it's Otis. It's time. She's ready, whether she knows it or not. They've gone too far. You need to come." He listened for a moment. Then he nodded. "Tomorrow night," Otis said. "The big gala. They'll all be there. Every last one of them." He paused and his voice cracked. "Come and tell her the truth, sir, before they break what's left of her." He hung up. But what happened the next night? No one in that building saw it coming. The gala was Joshua's masterpiece. He had planned it for weeks. A grand relaunch of the flagship restaurant, the crown jewel of the whole empire. He called it the New Era. 200 guests, reporters, investors he was quietly hoping to sell to, photographers, the whole city's finest, packed into the glowing dining room, and on his arm, in white, the new bride, Brielle. She wore the chef's coat over her gown like a costume, posing for the cameras, soaking up a respect she had never earned. Joshua stood and raised his glass. "Tonight," he announced, "we begin again. A new face, a new vision, a restaurant worthy of its name." The room applauded. Gloria beamed in her pearls. And where was Zuri? In the back, at the sink, ordered to wash dishes where the guests could not see her, because, as Gloria had put it, "We don't want anything spoiling the picture." So there she was, in a plain gray dress, her hands in the water, while the celebration of everything she had built roared on without her. The steam rose around her tired face. Her wedding ring, which she still had not taken off, caught the single light above the sink. "This is the moment. Remember the picture from the very start? We have arrived." "Scrub faster, dishwasher," Joshua said, leaning in through the kitchen doors with his glass in his hand. Brielle giggled behind him. Gloria turned to the staff. "Don't any of you help her." Zuri lowered her head, and she did not look up. And then the kitchen doors swung open. A gray-haired man in a tailored suit walked in. He moved slowly, with the calm of a man who had never once had to rush in his life. His suit was worth more than most cars. His shoes did not make a sound, and the air in the room changed the moment he crossed the threshold. Otis, the old head chef, took off his apron. He folded it once, set it down, and quietly stepped aside, like a soldier making way for a general. The stranger looked straight at Zuri, and the kitchen fell completely silent. Joshua's smile faltered. "Excuse me," he said. "This is staff only. Who are you?" The gray-haired man did not even look at him. He kept his eyes on the woman at the sink. "My name is Solomon Reed," he said. His voice was deep and even. "I was your father's partner for 31 years, and I have been searching for the right moment to speak to you for a very long time, Miss Carter." Carter, her father's name. Zuri's hands went still in the water. The dining room had gone quiet too, the way a room does when it senses something it does not understand. Guests drifted toward the kitchen doors. Phones came out. Joshua felt the night slipping out of his control and did not yet know why. Joshua tried to take control. He always tried to take control. "Sir, I don't know who let you back here, but I run this restaurant, and I am asking you to leave before I call—" "You run nothing," Solomon said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He said it the way you state the weather. "You have run nothing for a single day of your life. You have only ever stood on top of what another man built and called it yours. Now be quiet. A daughter is about to hear from her father." The word landed like a stone in still water. Father. The guests pressing at the doors went silent. A reporter near the front lowered her phone, then thought better of it and raised it again, recording every second. Gloria's hand drifted up to her pearls. Brielle's smile twitched at the corners, the first crack in a face she had kept perfect all night. Joshua laughed, but it came out thin. Her father ran a little diner, a counter and some stools. The man flipped eggs. "The man," Solomon said quietly, "built something this city will be talking about in 100 years, and he hid how large it had grown on purpose, so that vultures like you would never see it coming. Watch closely, young man. You're about to learn exactly what you threw in the garbage." Solomon Reed walked across the kitchen, past Joshua, past Brielle, past Gloria in her pearls, and he stopped in front of Zuri at the sink. "Forgive me," he said gently. "Forgive me for letting it go this long. Your father gave me one instruction, and I kept it, even when it hurt to watch. He told me you were to earn every station with your own hands before the truth was ever spoken. He wanted you to know the bottom before you were handed the top. Solomon's voice softened. You've earned it. You earned it years ago, and tonight I will not stay silent one more minute. He reached into his coat and drew out a folder, but before he opened it, he looked at the leather journal sitting on the shelf above the sink, the one Zuri kept close even now. May I? He asked. With trembling hands, she gave it to him. He opened the back cover. He drew out the sealed letter, the one her father had told her to open only when the kitchen turned against her. The one she had been too afraid to open herself. He wrote 2 copies, Solomon said quietly. One for you to open when you were ready, and one for me to read aloud on the day I judged you had suffered enough. I should have read it sooner. God forgive me. I should have read it sooner. He broke the seal, and he read. The room held its breath, and so will you, because here is the truth that not one person in that building knew. The letter was her father's last will and testament. Every restaurant, every location across the country, every wall, every table, every kitchen, every honor and award the empire had ever earned, all of it left to one single person. Zuri, not Joshua, not the management, not investors, her, the sole owner. The girl who learned to wash dishes first, the woman standing at the sink in a plain gray dress with grease on her hands. Everything you've been scrubbing tonight, child, Solomon said, and his deep voice cracked just slightly. The floor you're standing on, the walls around you, every fork in every drawer of every one of these restaurants from one coast to the other. It was always yours. All of it. It has been yours since the day your father passed. Do you understand what that meant? She did not marry into anything. She did not need Joshua. She did not need his name or his crown or his permission. The empire he had been planning to sell out from under her was never his to touch. He had been living inside her house, eating off her plates, ordering her to scrub her own floors. And here is the thing about that fortune. It was the kind of money that does not change a house or a car. It changes a name. It changes a family for 100 years. It was generational, the kind of wealth that most people only ever read about. And it had belonged to the dishwasher the entire time. Her father used to say, "The fire never lies." And tonight, it told the whole truth. For the first time in this entire story, Zuri lifted her head. She looked up, slowly, the water dripping from her hands, and the woman who had stayed silent through every cruelty finally let her eyes move across the room. To Gloria, frozen in her pearls, to Brielle, whose painted smile had died on her face, and finally to Joshua. She did not shout, she did not cry. She spoke low and clear, and every soul in that silent kitchen heard her. "You wanted a name," she said to her husband. "You married mine." Joshua opened his mouth. Nothing came out. She was not finished. She set the next plate down, slow and gentle, and she dried her hands on her plain gray dress. Then she looked at him with eyes that held no anger at all, only something far worse for him. Calm. "You fired me to feel like a man," she said. "You told me this place needed a name and not a sentiment. You were right. It needed a name. It just turned out the name was always mine." She paused. "You stood in my father's house and you called me a dishwasher. So I washed. Because my father taught me there is no shame in the bottom of a kitchen. The only shame is in the men who put people there for sport." Brielle took a small step back. The The chef's coat suddenly looked like what it was, a costume on a stranger. And Gloria, the woman who had ordered the staff not to help her, sat down hard in a chair as if her legs had simply quit. The betrayers had nothing left to say. But the fall, oh, the fall had only just begun. Justice, when it comes, is rarely loud. Real justice is quiet and slow and complete. Solomon Reed turned to face Joshua, and now there was steel under the calm. As the executor of the estate, he said, and on behalf of the rightful owner, I am informing you in front of these witnesses that your position here is terminated effective immediately. You have no authority in this building. You never did. Joshua laughed, a desperate, ugly sound. You can't do that. I run this place. I have contracts. You have debts, Solomon said, and his voice was very calm. A great many of them. We know about all of them. The loans you took against property that was never yours. The promises you made with money you did not have. The buyers you've been quietly courting to sell a kingdom that was never yours to sell. He let that sit. By morning, every person in this room will know it too. The reporters were writing now. The investors Joshua had hoped to charm were backing toward the doors, already pulling out their phones, already wanting nothing to do with the sinking man in the fine suit. And here is where it broke him completely. Because Brielle, the woman in white, the woman who had whispered poison in his ear, took one look at the room and understood there was no fortune here. There was no crown. There was only a ruined man buried in debt and a scandal with his name on it. So she did what people like her always do. She slid the chef's coat off her shoulders, let it fall to the floor, and she walked away from him. Right there, in front of everyone. She did not even look back. Brielle, Joshua said. Brielle, wait. She did not wait. The doors swung shut behind her, and just like that, the woman he had thrown his marriage away for was gone, proving in a single moment that she had never loved him at all. She had loved the crown, and the crown had never been his. You see, the fire never lies. It had simply taken a little while to reveal what was always there. Gloria did not escape either. The forged paperwork she had used to erase Zuri's name came to light within the week. The same society she had worshipped her whole life, the people whose approval she had craved, now whispered her name with disgust at every party she was no longer invited to. The pearls could not save her. Pride never can. And Joshua? Joshua lost everything. The position, the apartment that was tied to it, the reputation he had spent a lifetime faking. He stood in the middle of the dining room he thought he ruled, and he watched the guests file out around him, and he understood, far too late, exactly what he had thrown away. Not a restaurant, not a fortune, a woman who had once loved him when he had nothing, a woman whose only crime was being greater than he could stand. He turned to find her one last time before she left. He found her by the kitchen doors, the journal in her arms, and the desperation in his face was an ugly thing to see. "Zuri," he said, and his voice broke on her name. "We can fix this. We were good once. You and me, we built something. I made a mistake, baby. I was scared. I wasn't thinking. Please." She looked at him for a long moment. And here is the cruelest mercy of all. She did not hate him. You could see it. The hate would have meant she still cared. "You didn't make a mistake," she said quietly. "A mistake is something you do once, by accident. You did this every single day. You woke up every morning and you chose it. That's not a mistake, Joshua. That's just who you are." She held the journal a little tighter. My father always told me the fire shows you the truth of a person. Well, the fire showed me yours, and I believe it. She did not slam the door. She did not raise her voice. She simply turned and walked, and he was left standing alone in the ruins of a kingdom that had never, not for one single day, belonged to him. Now here is where you find out who Zuri really was, because a smaller person would have gloated. A smaller person would have screamed every cruel word back, made him crawl, made him beg. She did none of that. She walked over to Otis, the old head chef who had watched over her, who had made the call that brought the truth through that door. She took his weathered hand in both of hers. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not looking away, for remembering who I was, even when I forgot." The old man wept openly, and Zuri reinstated him on the spot, along with every loyal cook who had stood by her, who had wanted to help her at the sink and been forbidden. Then she did one last thing. She walked back to the dish sink. She looked down at the dirty water, the grease, the rack of plates, and slowly she slid her wedding ring off her finger. She set it down, not in a velvet box, not in her palm. She set it right there on the dirty dish rack, in the lowest place in the kitchen, the place where they had tried to bury her. "You belong here," she said quietly. Not to the ring, to everything it meant. And then Zuri picked up her father's journal, held it to her chest, and walked out of that kitchen with her head high and her back straight, leaving the noise and the ruin and the silence behind her. She did not slam a single door. She did not have to. Let some time pass now. Let the dust settle. Let the wounds close. Months later, in a quieter part of the city, there is a small restaurant. Not the grandest of the empire, not the most famous. A warm, modest place with good light and the smell of something wonderful always drifting out the door. And in the kitchen, there is a woman cooking. Her sleeves are rolled up. There is flour on her apron and steam on the windows. And she is humming, low, the same way her father used to hum in that little corner diner all those years ago. Beside her stands old Otis, teaching a row of young cooks. And Zuri moves down that line the way her father once moved down his, her hands over their small hands, her voice gentle and sure. "You don't run a kitchen you've never cleaned," she tells them. "The pot you scrub today is the pot you'll cook in tomorrow. Never look down on the bottom. The bottom is where everything is built." The young cooks nod, not yet understanding. One day they will. Above the pass, where every cook can see it, hangs a framed page from her father's journal. The leather book is whole again, the ribbon retied, and on the wall beside it sits a photograph of a big man with soft eyes and scarred forearms, and next to the photo, in a simple frame, the letter. Opened now, no longer feared. She runs the whole empire now, of course, the restaurants across the country, the honors, the name. But you will not find her in a tower. You will find her here, in a kitchen, with her hands in the work, because that is the only throne she ever wanted. Her father used to say, "The fire never lies." And neither did she. She just waited. She waited through every insult and every cruelty for the truth to rise on its own, the way good bread rises, slow and certain, when you give it time and warmth. So what does this story leave us with? This: never measure a person by the lowest place you put them. The woman scrubbing the dishes may own the building. The quiet one in the corner may be the strongest soul in the room. People who are truly great do not need to announce it. They do not have to step on anyone to feel tall. They simply stand in their own time when the moment is right, and the whole room goes silent. Zuri never raised her voice. She never begged. She never returned cruelty for cruelty. And in the end, she did not lose a single thing that was truly hers. She washed the dishes in the kitchen she owned, and she never let them see her break. If her silence taught you that dignity is louder than revenge, type, "The fire never lies below." So I know you felt it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that their season is coming. And subscribe, because the next woman they underestimate might just surprise you even more. The fire never lies, and neither should you. Watch closely. Her story is far from the last.